The rain had been relentless all morning, turning the narrow streets of the small town into rivers of brown sludge. Cars splashed through puddles, and umbrellas bobbed like a sea of tiny islands, but one man seemed untouched by the storm. Ethan Crawford, a billionaire whose name echoed in boardrooms and social circles alike, strode briskly along the slick sidewalks, his polished leather shoes untouched by the mud around him. His tailored coat and crisp shirt set him apart from the dripping masses, and his mind, preoccupied with mergers and investments, left little room for the world outside his curated bubble. Ethan had never cared much for charity. He gave, yes, but only where it benefited him. Donations, sponsorships, and philanthropic appearances were as much about image as impact. Today, however, he had agreed to speak at a local community center, a stipulation by his niece, who had insisted he experience the real world, not just the one he created. He wasn't impressed. In fact, he was irritated. The streets reeked of wet earth and despair, and every honk and shout felt like a personal insult. As he approached the community center, a sharp cry pierced the rain-soaked air. Ethan paused, his brow furrowing. It wasn't the usual clamor of the city, there was a raw, desperate edge to it. Following the sound, he found her, a girl no older than 10, her hair plastered to her face with mud, her small body trembling from cold and fear. She had fallen into a ditch, her thin jacket soaked, her shoes caked with filth. Her eyes, wide and panicked, locked onto him. "Help me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Please." Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to this raw need, this unfiltered plea. His first instinct was to turn away. He had meetings, obligations, and a carefully timed schedule. But then, something in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't just fear, it was a quiet dignity, a spark of resilience that seemed to say, "I deserve to be seen." He knelt, keeping his expensive coat away from the mud, and held out a gloved hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, though the words felt inadequate. I lost my brother," she whispered, her voice shaking. "He ran that way." She pointed toward a winding alley that disappeared into the haze of rain. Her words were barely audible, yet heavy with a weight Ethan couldn't ignore. Without thinking, he waded into the muck behind her, ignoring the squeak of his expensive shoes sinking into sludge. "Tell me what happened," he said. "My brother. He was trying to cross the street. He tripped. I ran after him. I couldn't catch him." Her sobs shook her tiny frame, and Ethan's chest tightened in an unfamiliar way. This wasn't a business problem. This wasn't something he could outsource. This was a human being in pain, and she had nobody else. For what felt like hours, he searched with her, navigating the slippery roads, shouting her brother's name into the pouring rain. Passers-by watched, some in disbelief, others with muted admiration. Ethan Crawford, the untouchable billionaire, was knee-deep in mud, drenched, and focused entirely on a child he had never met. Finally, they found him. The boy, no more than 8, had taken shelter under a crumbling porch, shivering but alive. Relief washed over the girl, and she flung herself into her brother's arms, tears soaking both of their faces. Ethan, standing back, felt an unfamiliar warmth. He had helped save a life. Not with money, not with power, but simply by choosing to care. The girl looked at him, mud streaking her cheeks, her eyes shining through tears. "Thank you," she said simply. "You didn't have to, but you did." Her words struck him harder than any boardroom negotiation or public accolade ever could. He realized that all his wealth, all his achievements, meant little compared to the simple, profound impact of compassion. Money could build empires, yes, but it could not mend a scared heart, warm a shivering child, or create trust in someone who had no one else to rely on. For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't think of ROI, stocks, or contracts. He thought of humanity. He thought of the little girl, mud-streaked and trembling, and the boy who had hidden under the porch, alone. He thought of what it meant to be truly present for someone, even when inconvenience and discomfort called him back to his insulated life. He knelt beside her. "You were brave," he said. "Both of you were. Don't ever forget that." The girl smiled faintly, the first real smile he had seen all day. It was fragile, tentative, but it held a strength that left him in awe. When they finally returned the children safely to their home, Ethan refused to leave immediately. He listened as their mother hugged them, thanked him, and offered him tea, which he politely declined. He lingered because he wanted to remember this feeling, the raw, undeniable proof that a single act of kindness could ripple far beyond any spreadsheet or bank statement. Weeks passed, and Ethan found he could not forget the girl's eyes, the boy's relief, or the pure, unfiltered humanity of that rainy day. He began to change. Not through speeches, not through charity events, but through quiet, deliberate acts. He funded local shelters without fanfare, mentored troubled youths anonymously, and dedicated time to organizations that worked with vulnerable children. The world didn't notice, the media didn't applaud, but Ethan did notice, and that, he realized, was enough. One evening, as he walked through the same streets, now cleaned and sunny, he spotted the girl again. She waved, still muddy from her adventures in life but smiling without fear. She ran up to him, hand outstretched. "You saved us," she said. "But more than that, you showed me that people can care, even strangers." "I'll never forget that." Ethan took her hand, feeling the grit and warmth in a way he had never expected. "And I'll never forget you," he replied. "You reminded me why it matters to care." That day, he finally understood a truth he had long ignored. True wealth was not measured in dollars or titles but in love, compassion, and the courage to reach out to someone in need. The rain could soak the streets, mud could cling to shoes, and life could be messy, but kindness, when offered without expectation, could transform everything. Ethan Crawford had nearly walked away that day, as he had so many times before. But a mud-covered girl's voice stopped him. And in that pause, he discovered the most valuable investment of all, humanity. From then on, he walked the streets differently, not as a man of wealth and power, but as a man who knew that every small act of care had the potential to reshape a life, and maybe even the world. And the memory of a muddy little girl who dared to speak would always remind him that sometimes, the simplest voices carry the loudest truths.